My name is Kent Richardson, and at 67 years old, I never expected my own flesh and blood to betray me. While fighting stage 3 lung cancer in the hospital, my son William sold our third-generation family farm right out from under me, forging my signature on the papers. I overheard him on the phone calling me a poor old farmer who didn't know any better. What my son didn't realize was that his poor old dad was actually the secret founder of Agritech Solutions, a company worth $485 million. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from today? Go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever had to teach someone a difficult but necessary lesson about respect and family values. I was born in the spring of 1958, when the Nebraska prairies were alive with promise and possibility. My parents, hard-working folk who had weathered the tail end of the Great Depression and fought through World War II, owned a modest 200 acres that had been in our family since my grandfather staked his claim in the early 1900s. We weren't rich by any means, but we were never hungry either. The Richardson farm produced enough corn, wheat, and soybeans to keep us comfortable, with a little extra to save for hard times. My father, Edward Richardson, was a man of few words but profound wisdom. He would often take me by the hand at sunrise, leading me to the edge of our property, where you could see the golden fields stretching toward the horizon. "This land, Kent," he would say, his calloused hand resting on my small shoulder. "It's more than dirt and crops. It's our heritage, our future. Treat it with respect, and it will take care of our family for generations." My mother, Sarah, complimented my father's pragmatism with her gentle encouragement of education. "You can love the land," she would tell me while helping with homework by kerosene lamp, "but you should also understand it. Knowledge makes a farmer wise, not just hardworking." Those early lessons shaped my path. Unlike many farm kids who dropped out after high school to work full-time on family land, I became the first Richardson to attend college. In 1976, I enrolled at the University of Nebraska to study agricultural engineering. My parents scraped together every penny they had saved, and I worked multiple jobs to make it happen. Those 4 years were transformative in ways I never could have imagined. It was in my sophomore year that I met Elaine Johnson, a brilliant computer science student with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. We met in the university library where I was researching irrigation systems, and she was coding a program for her advanced computing class. I remember being immediately struck by her intensity, the way she could stare at a problem until it surrendered its secrets. "You're staring," she said without looking up from her notebook, startling me out of my thoughts. "Sorry," I mumbled, embarrassed at being caught. "I'm just impressed by anyone who understands computers. They're like magic to me." That made her smile, finally looking up to meet my eyes. "There's no magic to it, just logic and patience. Kind of like farming, I imagine." That simple comparison sparked a conversation that lasted until the library closed, and continued through 4 years of dating. Elaine saw connections between technology and agriculture that had never occurred to me. While I understood the practical aspects of farming, she envisioned a future where computers could optimize everything from seed planting to harvest timing. After graduating with honors in 1980, I returned to the family farm with Elaine as my wife. My father was getting older, his back permanently bent from decades of physical labor. He welcomed my new ideas about crop rotation and sustainable farming practices, though he would often joke, "All that fancy book learning, and you still can't predict when it's gonna rain." Elaine took a programming job with a small company in Lincoln, commuting the 40 miles each way daily. At night, we would sit at our kitchen table, sketching ideas for agricultural technologies that could revolutionize farming. Automated irrigation systems that could sense soil moisture levels. Computer programs that could analyze weather patterns to optimize planting schedules. Equipment that could apply fertilizer with precision rather than wasting it with broad coverage. "You should start a company," Elaine suggested one evening in 1985, after I'd shown her my designs for a computer-controlled pivot irrigation system. "These ideas could help thousands of farmers, not just us." "With what money?" I laughed. "We're still paying off student loans." But Elaine was serious. She had been saving her technology sector paychecks and had amassed a surprising amount. Furthermore, she had contacts in the burgeoning tech industry who might be interested in investing in agricultural innovation. With her encouragement and connections, we founded Agritech Solutions in 1985, operating initially out of our farmhouse basement. We made a conscious decision from the beginning. Our company would remain separate from our identity as farmers. I didn't want special treatment from neighbors who had known me all my life, and I worried that sudden wealth might change how our future children understood the value of hard work. So we created a corporate structure with trusted partners that kept my name off public documents. Jack Thompson, my college roommate, and now a corporate attorney, helped establish the legal framework that allowed me to be the majority owner while maintaining anonymity. As Agritech Solutions began to grow, first regionally and then nationally, Elaine and I continued living modestly on the farm. We invested profits back into research and development rather than flashy displays of wealth. My father passed away in 1987, leaving the farm to me with the same words he'd always shared. Take care of the land, and it will take care of our family. Little did he know how prophetic those words would become. As our agricultural technology company continued to expand, bringing innovations to farms across America, while our family remained rooted in the same soil that had nourished us for generations. William Edward Richardson came into our world on a stormy April morning in 1989. The doctor had to navigate flooded country roads to reach our farmhouse, where Elaine gave birth in our own bedroom, just as generations of Richardson women had done before. I remember holding my son for the first time, his tiny face red and wrinkled, his fists clenched tight as if he was already fighting to make his mark on the world. He has your determination. Elaine laughed weakly, exhausted but radiant after 14 hours of labor. And your intelligence, I replied, noticing how his eyes, though unfocused, seemed to take in everything around him with intensity. By this time, Agritech Solutions had grown beyond our basement into proper offices in Lincoln. I split my time between running the farm and guiding the company's development from behind the scenes, while Elaine worked remotely as our chief technology officer. Our dual lives required careful compartmentalization. To our neighbors and the farming community, we were simply Kent and Elaine Richardson, moderately successful farmers who had modernized the old Richardson place. Only a handful of trusted individuals knew about our connection to the rapidly expanding agricultural technology company making waves in the industry. William's early years were shaped entirely by farm life. I made sure he understood the rhythms of the land from the moment he could toddle after me across the fields. By age 5, he had his own pair of tiny work boots and followed me everywhere, asking endless questions about crops, weather, and machinery. "Why do we plant corn in rows, Dad?" he would ask, his small hand wrapped around just 2 of my fingers. "So each plant gets enough sunlight and water, and so we can drive the tractor between them," I'd explain, lifting him up onto my shoulders so he could see the neat rows stretching into the distance. Some of my fondest memories are of teaching William to drive our old Ford tractor when his legs could barely reach the pedals. I'd sit him on my lap, guiding his hands on the steering wheel while explaining how the gears worked. His face would light up with pride when we completed a straight furrow together. "We did it, Dad," he would exclaim, his voice pitched high with excitement. "We made the earth move." On rainy days, we'd repair equipment in the barn, his small fingers learning to handle tools with surprising dexterity. By age 10, he could change the oil in the tractor and knew the basics of engine maintenance. During harvest seasons, he'd ride alongside me in the combine, sometimes falling asleep to the rhythmic rumble of machinery but always eager to help. Elaine worried sometimes about our decision to keep our wealth hidden from our son. "Are we being fair to him?" she asked one night after William had gone to bed. "Other kids his age have video games and fancy toys. We're giving him something more valuable," I argued. "The understanding that satisfaction comes from work well done, not things purchased." Elaine wasn't entirely convinced, but she respected my desire to raise William with the same values that had shaped me. We compromised by ensuring he had educational opportunities beyond what most farm kids received: music lessons in town, science camps during summers, the best books we could find, all presented as careful budgeting rather than signs of our hidden prosperity. As William entered middle school, I began noticing subtle changes in his attitude toward farm life. The first time he declined to join me for morning chores, preferring to sleep in, I dismissed it as normal teenage behavior. But when he started making excuses to avoid the farmer's market where we sold our organic produce, I sensed something deeper was happening. The truth emerged one evening when I overheard him on the phone with a school friend. "No, I can't come to the movie," he said, his voice tinged with resentment. "I have to help Dad with stupid farm stuff. My hands are going to smell like cow manure forever." The comment stung more than I cared to admit. That night, I tried to engage him in conversation about his growing disinterest in agriculture. "Farming is a noble profession," I told him over dinner. "It's independence and purpose combined." William pushed his food around his plate, avoiding my eyes. "Nobody at school thinks so. Tyler Jenkins called me farmer boy today like it was some kind of insult. His dad works in an office in Lincoln and wears a suit every day." "And what's wrong with honest work that doesn't require a suit?" I asked, feeling my temperature rise despite my efforts to stay calm. "Everything," William exploded, surprising both Elaine and me with his vehemence. "We live in the middle of nowhere. Our internet is too slow for decent gaming. My clothes smell like the barn no matter how many times they're washed. I'm tired of being different." Elaine placed a gentle hand on my arm, silently urging restraint. "William," she said softly, "everyone feels different in middle school. That's part of growing up. Other kids don't have to get up at 5 in the morning to milk cows before school," he muttered. "Other kids' parents have normal jobs." If only he knew about the company boardroom where I made decisions affecting thousands of employees, or the patents bearing my name filed under the company's umbrella. But we had decided long ago to keep that separate, and I wasn't ready to change course because of teenage rebellion. The tension only increased as William entered high school. Bright and academically gifted, he began talking constantly about college, not agricultural programs like I had pursued, but business schools in major cities. "I want to work in a skyscraper," he told us during his junior year. "I want to make real money, not just scrape by season after season hoping the weather cooperates." Each comment revealed how little he understood about our financial reality, but each also made it harder to consider revealing the truth. If he disdained farm life now, would knowing about our wealth only validate his belief that farming itself held no inherent value? I couldn't bear the thought. The breaking point came during his senior year when college acceptance letters arrived. William had been admitted to several prestigious business schools, including his top choice in New York City. The celebration dinner turned sour when I mentioned the possibility of him returning to modernize our farm operations after graduation. "I'm never coming back to this place," he stated flatly. "Not to live, anyway. I've spent 18 years watching you break your back for barely enough profit to send me to college. That's not the life I want." If he only knew that his Ivy League education was being paid for not through farm mortgages and loans as he assumed, but through a trust fund established with agritech dividends. If he only understood that the barely profitable farm he disdained was actually a living laboratory for innovations that had transformed agriculture across the country. But I remained silent, hoping time and maturity would eventually bring my son back to an appreciation of his roots. As I watched him pack for New York that autumn, I wondered if I had made the right choice in keeping our success a secret. I just never imagined that decision would one day put our family land and my relationship with my son at risk. William thrived in New York City like a plant finally finding its ideal growing conditions. The quarterly phone calls we received painted a picture of a young man rapidly adapting to urban life internships at financial firms, networking events with industry leaders, apartment sharing with other ambitious students in Brooklyn. His voice would become animated when describing the fast-paced environment, the connections he was making, the opportunities on the horizon. "Dad, you wouldn't believe the view from the 42nd floor of the Bergman building," he told me during his sophomore year. "I was there for an interview, and you can see the entire city laid out like a circuit board. It makes our farm look like a postage stamp." I bit back the reminder that our postage stamp had sustained his family for 3 generations. Instead, I asked about his studies, his friendships, whether he was eating properly. The conversations were cordial, but increasingly felt like exchanges between acquaintances rather than father and son. William's visits home became less frequent. Freshman year, he returned for both Thanksgiving and Christmas, though he spent much of his time on his laptop or phone. By junior year, he only came for Christmas, staying 3 days instead of the planned week. Each visit brought subtle changes, designer clothes replacing his practical farm wardrobe, a cultivated accent that minimized his Midwestern origins, references to people and places that existed in a world entirely separate from ours. During his senior year visit, I invited him to join me for a morning walk around the property, hoping to reconnect. The winter sun was just rising, painting the snow-covered fields in hues of pink and gold. I pointed out how the windbreak of pine trees we'd planted when he was 10 had matured into a significant barrier against the harsh northern winds. "Remember helping me dig those holes?" I asked, smiling at the memory of his determined little face as he wielded a shovel almost as tall as himself. William glanced at the trees without interest. "Seems like a lifetime ago." He pulled his expensive wool coat tighter against the cold. "I don't know how you stand the isolation out here. Don't you and Mom ever want more?" "More what?" I asked, genuinely puzzled. "More. Everything. Entertainment. Restaurants. Culture. People your own age to talk to who aren't just discussing corn prices and rainfall." He gestured around at the open landscape. "This lifestyle is so limiting." The comment stung deeply. What William saw as limitation, I had always experienced as freedom. The space to experiment, to work with my hands, to watch seasons change in real time rather than through the filter of weekend visits to manicured city parks. Moreover, he had no idea that Elaine and I regularly traveled to industry conferences and meetings in major cities across the country, that we maintained an apartment in Chicago used primarily for agritech business, that our limiting lifestyle was a conscious choice, not a sentence we were serving. "There's value in putting down roots," I said carefully. "In knowing land so well you can feel its needs, through your boots." William laughed, not unkindly but with the indulgence one might show a child with fanciful ideas. "That's very poetic, Dad, but not exactly marketable in today's economy." After graduation, William secured a position with a commercial real estate firm in Manhattan. His starting salary, which he mentioned prominently during a rare call home, was more than what most people in our county made in 3 years. The irony that his poor farmer father could have bought the firm he worked for wasn't lost on me, but I maintained our family's secret. As William climbed the corporate ladder, his calls became even less frequent. Most of our news came through Christmas cards or brief updates when Elaine specifically reached out to him. 3 years after college, he informed us he had specialized in agricultural land acquisition, buying family farms for development or corporate agriculture. The news hit like a physical blow. My son was now professionally involved in dismantling the very way of life that had sustained our family. "It's the future of farming, Dad," he explained during a tense phone conversation. "Small family operations can't compete with economies of scale. I'm helping farmers get fair value for land that's frankly dragging them into debt." "And what happens to those families after they sell?" I asked. "They retire comfortably, move to warmer climates, enjoy life instead of fighting the elements year after year." His tone suggested he was doing these people a favor, liberating them from agricultural serfdom. 6 years into his career, William made his first visit home in nearly 2 years. The purpose quickly became clear. He wanted to discuss the future of our farm. Property values in this area have increased 30% since that new highway extension, he informed us over dinner, speaking as if presenting to clients rather than talking to his parents. "If you sold now, you could buy a nice condo in Florida and never worry about money again." Elaine reached for my hand under the table, squeezing it in silent support. She knew how deeply William's suggestion wounded me. "This farm isn't just property on a balance sheet," I replied, keeping my voice steady with effort. "It's our heritage. My grandfather broke this soil. My father expanded it. I've improved it. It's meant to go to you someday, and then to your children." William sighed, setting down his fork. "Dad, be realistic. I'm never going to farm this land. I have a life in New York, a career, a girlfriend who's never even seen a cow up close. This place will just be a burden to me when you're gone." "Then we've failed as parents," I said quietly. "If we raised a son who sees his birthright as a burden." The conversation deteriorated from there. William accused us of living in the past, of clinging to outdated notions of legacy in a world that valued mobility and adaptability. I accused him of abandoning values that had sustained our family through dust bowls, depressions, and droughts. Elaine tried to mediate, but the gulf between our perspectives had grown too wide. William left the next morning instead of staying the planned weekend. As his rental car disappeared down our long driveway, Elaine put her arm around my waist. "Perhaps it's time to tell him the truth," she suggested gently. "About the company, about our choices." I shook my head stubbornly. If he doesn't value the farm knowing it's his heritage, why would he value it more knowing it's backed by money? That would only confirm his belief that everything has a price tag. It was a decision I would come to question deeply in the months ahead, as our family's private Cold War evolved into active betrayal. And as my own body began to betray me as well, I would face the most difficult choice of my life, whether to maintain the principles that had guided me for decades, or to reveal a truth that might save our family land, but destroy what remained of my relationship with my son. Life can change in the space between heartbeats. One moment, everything follows its expected pattern. The next, you're standing in the ruins of what you thought was solid ground. For us, that moment came on an ordinary Tuesday in April 2022. Elaine and I had spent the morning in the greenhouse, starting tomato seedlings for our summer garden. She seemed tired, but attributed it to spring allergies. After lunch, she went upstairs to lie down while I took a conference call with Agritech executives about a new moisture sensor we were developing. Halfway through the call, I felt a strange urge to check on Elaine. Excusing myself, I climbed the stairs to our bedroom to find her unconscious, her skin ashen, no pulse, no breath. I started CPR immediately, called 911 with shaking hands. But part of me already knew. My brilliant, compassionate, fierce Elaine, my partner in everything for 42 years, was gone. A sudden cardiac event, the doctors later confirmed. Quick and unexpected. Small comfort in the face of devastating loss. The funeral was a blur of faces and platitudes. Neighbors brought casseroles. Business associates sent elaborate flower arrangements with cards signed by people who had no idea of Elaine's true role in building Agritech. William flew in from New York, somber in an expensive black suit, genuinely grieving but already checking his watch by the reception's midpoint. "I have to get back," he explained when I asked if he could stay a few days. "We're closing a major deal this week. The firm's counting on me." "I'm counting on you too," I said, hearing the plea in my own voice and hating how it sounded. The farm is a lot for one person to manage, especially right now. William's expression softened momentarily with something like pity. "Hire help, Dad. Use some of the money from the farm account. This is exactly why I've been saying you should consider selling while land values are high. You don't need this burden, especially not now." He left the following morning with promises to call regularly. Promises that materialized as brief Sunday evening check-ins that grew increasingly sporadic. Meanwhile, I moved through life like a ghost, going through the motions of farm work while grief hollowed me from within. I lost weight, slept poorly, found myself standing in rooms with no memory of why I'd entered them. By autumn, I had developed a persistent cough that I attributed to dust from the harvest and the emotional toll of my first solo season without Elaine. When it hadn't improved by Thanksgiving, my doctor ordered tests that revealed the unthinkable: stage 3 lung cancer, non-small cell carcinoma, already spread to nearby lymph nodes. Treatable, but serious. With aggressive chemotherapy and radiation, we have reason for optimism, Dr. Harmon explained, using the careful language oncologists perfect. But you'll need support at home. Is there someone who can help you through this? My thoughts went immediately to William, then just as quickly dismissed the idea. My son had made it clear that his life was in New York. Calling him back to Nebraska for months of caregiving seemed impossible. Instead, I contacted Jack Thompson, my oldest friend, and Agritech's corporate counsel. Jack knew everything about our unusual arrangement and had been urging me for years to bring William into the fold. "Now's the time, Kent," he insisted when I explained my diagnosis. "Let your son know who you really are. Let him help you through this as the company's heir apparent." But something held me back. Stubbornness, perhaps. or fear that William would see the revelation as manipulation rather than honesty. Instead, I arranged for a rotating schedule of home health aides and asked neighbors to check in periodically. I informed William of my diagnosis during our next Sunday call, downplaying its severity. "It's treatable," I assured him. "No need to disrupt your life. I've got plenty of help here." William, to his credit, seemed genuinely concerned. "Are you sure, Dad? I could come out for a weekend, help you get organized." I declined, partly from pride and partly from exhaustion at the thought of managing his expectations of farm life, even while battling cancer. My first round of chemotherapy knocked me flat. The nausea was relentless, my strength evaporated, and the persistent metallic taste made eating an exercise in willpower rather than pleasure. After my second treatment, a severe infection sent me to the hospital for 10 days. It was during this hospital stay that William finally visited, arriving with a portfolio of documents and a mission I couldn't have anticipated. Standing at the foot of my hospital bed, he looked every inch the successful city businessman tailored suit, designer watch, carefully styled hair. The contrast between his vitality and my diminished state couldn't have been starker. "You need to face facts, Dad," he began after perfunctory inquiries about my health. "The farm is too much for you now. It was too much even before you got sick. I've brought some options for us to discuss." Too weak to argue effectively, I listened as he outlined 3 scenarios for selling the farm to a development company planning a subdivision, to a corporate agriculture firm, or to a wealthy individual looking for a country retreat. Each option included projected profits and timelines. None included the possibility of keeping the land in our family. "I've taken the liberty of having some preliminary discussions with potential buyers," William continued, not noticing or choosing to ignore my tightening expression. "Eastern Development is particularly interested. They've made a verbal offer that's quite generous." "Eastern Development?" I repeated, immediately recognizing the name of a subsidiary of our main competitor. The irony was almost too much to bear. "You've been shopping our farm without my knowledge or consent?" William had the grace to look momentarily abashed. "I've been exploring options, Dad. For your benefit, this illness changes everything. You can't manage the property, and frankly, the medical bills alone are reason enough to liquidate." What he didn't know, what I had never told him, was that my position with Agritech included comprehensive health insurance and that my medical expenses were negligible. What he saw as financial prudence was, to me, the final betrayal of everything our family had built. "The farm is not for sale," I said with as much strength as I could muster. "Not now. Not ever. Not to Eastern Development or anyone else. This conversation is over." William's face hardened in a way that reminded me painfully of his mother when she encountered an immovable obstacle. "You're not thinking clearly," he said, gathering his documents. "The chemo is affecting your judgment. We'll talk again when you're feeling stronger." After he left, I dozed fitfully, awakening to voices in the hallway outside my partially open door. William's distinctive tenor carried clearly into my room. "He's being completely unreasonable," my son was saying to someone, presumably on his phone, "clinging to that worthless piece of land like it's sacred. He's just a poor old farmer who doesn't understand that everything has a price tag." A pause, then a laugh that chilled me. "Don't worry. I've got power of attorney for medical decisions. It's not much of a stretch to use that for property matters, especially with his condition. By the time he's out of treatment, it'll be a done deal. He can thank me when he's living comfortably on the proceeds, instead of killing himself trying to run that place." The betrayal cut deeper than my surgical incisions. My own son, plotting to sell our heritage out from under me while I fought for my life. Using my illness as leverage, calling me a poor old farmer with contempt in his voice. That night, after the nurses had completed their rounds, I made 3 calls from my hospital room. The first was to Jack Thompson, instructing him to revoke any powers of attorney William might claim and to verify the status of our property. The second was to my oncologist, requesting a complete and honest assessment of my prognosis and treatment options. The third was to Agritech's chief operations officer, initiating a contingency plan we had established years ago but never expected to implement. By morning, I had discovered 2 devastating truths. William had indeed forged my signature on documents transferring farm ownership to a holding company he controlled, and Eastern Development had already paid him a substantial deposit. The sale was nearly complete. What William didn't realize, what he couldn't have known, was that his poor old farmer father was about to teach him the most expensive lesson of his life. The hospital room became my war room. Against medical advice, I discharged myself after confirming the scope of William's betrayal. The farm transaction was further along than I'd feared, with closing scheduled for the following month. William had returned to New York immediately after our confrontation, clearly confident that his plans would proceed without interference. Jack Thompson arrived at my farmhouse the evening after my discharge, carrying legal files and righteous indignation. At 66, Jack retained the imposing presence that had made him a formidable corporate attorney. His shock of white hair and penetrating gaze gave him an almost biblical appearance of judgment as he spread documents across my kitchen table. "He forged your signature on a power of attorney document dated last year," Jack explained, pointing to a notarized form. "The notary was legitimate but has no recollection of you being present. We can prove fraud there." "What about the sale itself?" I asked, fighting waves of fatigue that threatened to overwhelm me. The chemotherapy had left me weakened, but anger provided a powerful counteragent. Jack's expression darkened, more complicated. He created a family LLC with himself as managing member, then transferred the farm into it using the fraudulent power of attorney. The LLC is now selling to Eastern Development. It's a clever structure because it creates multiple layers to penetrate legally. "How much time do we have?" "Closing is scheduled for 30 days from now. We could file for an emergency injunction, but that would alert William immediately. I suggest a different approach." Jack leaned forward, lowering his voice despite us being alone in the house. "Eastern Development doesn't know they're dealing with Kent Richardson, founder of Agritech Solutions. They think they're buying land from a naive farmer's son." A plan began forming in my mind. Who exactly is behind Eastern Development these days? Cromwell Agronomic Systems is the parent company. They've been trying to compete with Agritech in the precision farming sector for years. I nodded slowly, pieces falling into place. "Get me everything you can on their financial situation, and contact Marion in acquisitions. I want to know if Cromwell is publicly traded and what their stock has done recently." For the next 3 days, I divided my time between recovery and revenge. The cancer treatments had taken their toll, but purpose fueled me with unexpected energy. Jack and the Agritech executive team worked tirelessly, gathering intelligence and preparing strategies. What emerged was better than I could have hoped. Cromwell Agronomic was overextended financially, having invested heavily in expansion, while their core technology lagged behind ours. Their stock had declined 20% over 6 months. The Eastern Development subsidiary was part of a diversification strategy, acquiring agricultural land for development into corporate farming operations using their parent company's technology. "They're desperate for a win," Marion Hodges, our acquisitions director, explained during a secure video call. "Our sources indicate they're planning to announce the purchase of your farm as a showcase project, converting traditional farming to their automated systems. What they don't realize," Jack added with grim satisfaction, "is that your traditional farm already incorporates proprietary agritech systems that we've never commercially released. They're paying for land that would give them access to our most advanced research." The pieces of my counter-strategy aligned perfectly. I authorized Agritech to begin quietly purchasing Cromwell stock through various shell companies and investment vehicles. Simultaneously, Jack prepared legal documentation proving William's fraud and the invalidity of the sale. But rather than filing these immediately, we would hold them as leverage. Dr. Harmon, my oncologist, provided unexpected good news amid the crisis. My latest scans showed the cancer responding well to treatment. "Your body is fighting hard," she told me during a checkup. "Whatever you're doing mentally is helping physically. I'm cautiously optimistic about your prognosis." By the 3rd week of our operation, Agritech controlled nearly 15% of Cromwell's stock. Not enough for a takeover, but sufficient to exert significant influence, especially when combined with their existing financial vulnerabilities. We learned that Cromwell had scheduled a board meeting for the day before the farm sale closing, intending to announce the acquisition as a strategic victory to nervous investors. Perfect timing. I told Jack during our daily strategy session. Have the executive team prepare for an emergency board meeting of our own, and send a formal invitation to William for a pre-closing discussion at Agritech headquarters. Don't mention my involvement. Let him think it's standard corporate procedure. Jack raised an eyebrow. You're planning to be there in person? Are you sure you're strong enough? The concern was valid. Despite improvement, I still tired easily and had lost nearly 30 pounds since beginning treatment. But this confrontation needed to happen face to face. I'll be there, I assured him. Even if you have to wheel me in. The final phase of our plan involved the most delicate timing. The day before Cromwell's board meeting, Agritech executed a series of strategic maneuvers. First, we announced a new patent for soil monitoring technology that rendered Cromwell's competing system obsolete. Their stock immediately dropped 7%. Then, through our accumulated shares and alliances with other investors, we initiated a vote of no confidence in Cromwell's current leadership, creating internal chaos. By that evening, Cromwell executives were in crisis mode, desperately trying to salvage their company's value and reputation. Their board meeting, intended to celebrate expansion, would instead become a referendum on survival. And in that vulnerable state, they received an unexpected offer. Agritech Solutions would consider acquiring Cromwell Agronomic Systems, including all subsidiaries, at a premium of 10% above current market value, conditional on the immediate cessation of all pending land acquisitions. The morning of our confrontation dawned clear and cool. I stood at my bedroom window, watching the sun rise over the fields my grandfather had first plowed nearly a century ago. The land had sustained us through multiple generations, its value extending far beyond monetary worth. Now it would serve one more purpose: teaching my son about consequences. Jack arrived to drive me to Agritech headquarters in Lincoln. The building itself reflected our company philosophy, impressive but understated, technologically advanced but harmoniously integrated with the surrounding landscape. Most employees knew me only as a consultant who occasionally visited from the research division. Today, they would learn my true identity, along with my son. As we entered through a private entrance, Jack updated me on developments. Cromwell's board has postponed their meeting pending our acquisition offer. Eastern Development has frozen all transactions, including the farm purchase. William arrived 10 minutes ago and is waiting in the executive conference room, thinking he's meeting with Eastern's corporate team. I nodded, straightening my suit jacket. Despite weight loss, I had insisted on wearing a properly tailored suit rather than more comfortable clothing. Appearance would matter today. Are you ready for this? Jack asked as we approached the conference room doors. The question encompassed so much more than the immediate confrontation. Was I ready to dismantle the separation between my two lives? To reveal my secret to the son who had betrayed me? To potentially destroy what remained of our relationship in order to save our heritage? No, I admitted quietly, but it needs to be done anyway. With that acknowledgement, I squared my shoulders and nodded to Jack. The doors opened, and we stepped into the next chapter of our family story, one that would either heal our deepest wounds or sever our ties permanently. The Agritech Executive Conference Room projected subtle power. 24 feet of polished walnut table dominated the space, surrounded by ergonomic chairs designed for long strategy sessions. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the Nebraska prairie, deliberately positioned to remind occupants of the agricultural foundation beneath our technological innovations. Digital displays, embedded in the walls, showed real-time data from experimental fields around the country, including though few knew it, my own farm. William sat midway down the table, reviewing documents with the focused intensity I recognized from his mother. He looked up as the doors opened, expecting Eastern Development executives. The momentary confusion on his face when he saw me quickly transformed to concern, then wariness. "Dad?" He stood, his expensive suit making him look more like a visitor than the farm's rightful heir. "What are you doing here? You should be resting." Behind me, 12 members of Agritech's executive leadership filed into the room, taking seats without introduction. Jack Thompson directed me to the chair at the head of the table, remaining standing at my right side. "I'm exactly where I need to be," I replied. my voice steadier than I had feared it might be. "Please, sit down. This won't take long." William lowered himself slowly, eyes darting between unfamiliar faces. "I don't understand. Where are the Eastern representatives? We have preliminary closing discussions scheduled." Jack cleared his throat. "Eastern Development representatives send their regrets. They're currently engaged in emergency meetings regarding their parent company's future." Confusion deepened on William's face. "What does that have to do with our transaction?" "Everything," I said simply. I nodded to Marion Hodges, who activated the main display screen. The Agritech Solutions logo appeared, followed by a corporate structure chart showing subsidiaries, research divisions, and financial holdings. At the top, my name as founder and chairman. William stared at the screen, then at me, incomprehension, giving way to disbelief. "What is this? Some kind of joke?" "No joke." I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the table. "Agritech Solutions was founded in 1985 by your mother and me. I've been its majority shareholder and chairman since inception. The company currently employs over 800 people across 17 states and has a market valuation of $485 million. The blood drained from William's face as implications cascaded through his mind. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's impossible. You're a farmer. We've always struggled financially. Mom worked as a programmer to make ends meet. Your mother was Agritech's chief technology officer and co-founder. Her programming job was developing the algorithms that became our core products." I gestured to the woman seated 3 chairs down. "This is Dr. Abigail Chen, who took over after your mother stepped back to focus on research." Dr. Chen nodded solemnly. "Your mother was brilliant. Our current irrigation management systems still use her original framework." William's shock transformed to anger, his jaw tightening. "If this is true, you've been lying to me my entire life, making me believe we were barely getting by when you were. This." He gestured broadly at the corporate display. "We chose not to emphasize our financial success," I corrected gently. "We wanted you to understand the value of the land itself, not just its monetary worth. To appreciate our heritage for what it was, not what it could buy. So you let me think we were poor? Let me work summer jobs for spending money? Made me feel guilty about college tuition?" William's voice rose with each question. "Do you have any idea how that shaped me? How hard I've worked to escape that life?" The executive team remained professionally impassive, though I caught several exchanging glances. This family drama wasn't what they had expected from an emergency board meeting. "We gave you everything you truly needed," I said, "including the chance to develop your own work ethic and identity. We paid your full college tuition without loans, provided a generous allowance disguised as scholarships, and never once interfered with your career choices." William's laugh was brittle. "How magnanimous of you. And now what? You've staged this revelation to what? Punish me? Embarrass me? Remind me that I don't measure up to the great Kent Richardson legacy. I've called this meeting to address your attempted theft of family property through fraudulent means," I stated, my voice hardening. Jack distributed folders to everyone present. "These documents detail the illegal transfer of the Richardson farm to your limited liability company using a forged power of attorney." William paled further but maintained his defiance. "I was acting in your best interest. You're sick, unable to manage the property. The sale would have provided security for your remaining years." "My remaining years are likely to be more numerous than you anticipated," I replied, "and considerably more comfortable than you imagined, even without selling my heritage." Jack took over the presentation, detailing the legal consequences of William's actions. Fraud charges, potential imprisonment, certain disbarment from any financial industry position. As he spoke, William's expression shifted from defiance to dawning horror. "Furthermore," Jack continued, "Agritech Solutions has tendered an offer to acquire Cromwell Agronomic Systems, Eastern Development's parent company. The board voted this morning to accept our terms, which include cancellation of all pending land acquisitions, including the Richardson farm." I gestured to the chief financial officer, who advanced the presentation to reveal the company's succession plans. My name appeared with a retirement date, 2 years in the future. Below it, a blank space where a successor should be named. Until recent events, this space was reserved for you, I explained quietly. Despite your disinterest in farming, I always intended for you to lead agritech eventually, to combine your business acumen with our agricultural innovation. That option remains available, contingent on certain conditions. William stared at the organizational chart, the magnitude of what he had nearly thrown away finally registering. What conditions? He asked, his voice barely audible. First, all fraudulent documents will be nullified immediately. The farm returns to my sole ownership. I held up a hand as William began to speak. Second, you will take a leave of absence from your current position to complete a 6-month residential program at our research campus, learning every aspect of our operation from the ground up, literally, starting with soil science. You expect me to become a farmer after all? Bitterness edged his words. I expect you to understand what you would be managing before you attempt to manage it. I met his gaze directly. Knowledge of both the land and the technology is non-negotiable for anyone who would lead this company. The executives around us remained professionally stoic, but I could sense their evaluation of my son, and by extension, my judgment in potentially naming him my successor. William must have felt it too, his posture straightening almost imperceptibly. And if I refuse? If I'd rather maintain my current career? I closed my folder deliberately. Then the legal proceedings for fraud will continue. Your career in finance will end, and agritech will move forward under different leadership. I softened my tone slightly. This isn't vindictiveness, William. It's consequence. Something I perhaps protected you from too much in your youth. For several long moments, the conference room remained silent, except for the subtle hum of electronic equipment. I could almost see the calculations running behind William's eyes, weighing options, assessing leverage, searching for alternatives. Finally, he spoke, his voice carefully controlled. May I have time to consider these terms? 24 hours, I replied. Jack will provide the necessary documentation for your review. I nodded to the executive team, who recognized the dismissal and began gathering their materials. As they filed out, William remained seated, staring at the succession chart still displayed on the screen. When only Jack, William, and I remained, I allowed myself to show the fatigue that had been building throughout the confrontation. We'll speak tomorrow, son. For now, I need to rest. William looked up, really seeing my physical condition perhaps for the first time since entering the room. You really are sick, aren't you? This wasn't exaggerated to manipulate me. Stage 3 lung cancer, I confirmed. Responding well to treatment, but yes, it's serious. Something shifted in his expression, not quite remorse, but perhaps the beginning of recognition. I'll review the documents, he said quietly, and I'll have my decision tomorrow. As Jack helped me from the room, I glanced back to see William still seated, staring at his reflection in the darkened screen, where moments before he had glimpsed a future he never knew was possible. Whether that future would now include him remained, like my prognosis, uncertain but cautiously hopeful. After the executive board dispersal, Jack insisted on driving me back to the farm himself, rather than having my regular driver take me. The early autumn afternoon had turned golden, sunlight slanting across harvested fields as we traveled the familiar route from Lincoln to the Richardson property. You handled that better than I expected, Jack remarked, glancing sideways at me, especially given your condition. I watched the landscape passing outside my window. Anger is a powerful temporary substitute for strength. Tomorrow will be harder. Do you think he'll accept your terms? The question had been circling in my mind since we left headquarters. William had looked genuinely shocked by the revelation of our family's true financial situation. But shock could evolve in multiple directions, toward introspection and growth, or toward deeper resentment. I don't know, I admitted. He has his mother's intelligence, but not yet her wisdom. The William I raised would see this as an opportunity. The man he's become might see only humiliation. Jack nodded thoughtfully. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing, both as a father and as chairman. Either he rises to this challenge and becomes worthy of the company, or he proves himself unfit to lead it. Either way, I lose something precious, I murmured. Either the company loses its best potential leader, or I lose my son even more completely than before. We drove the remainder of the journey in companionable silence, both lost in our own thoughts. After helping me inside and ensuring I had everything needed for the evening, Jack departed with promises to return the following afternoon for William's decision. Left alone in the farmhouse that had witnessed so much of our family's history, I felt the weight of decades pressing down. Photographs of 3 generations of Richardsons lined the hallway, my grandfather standing proudly beside his first tractor in 1928, my father accepting an Agricultural Innovation Award in 1965, Elaine and I on our wedding day, William as a toddler sitting atop a hay bale. So much life, so much legacy, nearly undone by misunderstanding and secrecy. Had Elaine been right all along? Should we have told William the truth from the beginning? I had been so certain that keeping our wealth separate would teach him the values I treasured: hard work, connection to the land, appreciation for things money couldn't buy. Instead, it had created a chasm between us, filled with resentment and false assumptions. My reflections were interrupted by the sound of tires on gravel. Through the front window, I watched a rental car approach, recognizing William's silhouette behind the wheel. He had come sooner than expected. By the time he knocked, I had settled in the living room, deliberately choosing my usual worn leather armchair rather than trying to project strength I didn't possess. "Come in," I called, my voice steady despite the rapid beating of my heart. William entered cautiously, as if crossing a threshold into unfamiliar territory rather than his childhood home. He had changed from his business suit into casual clothes, looking younger and somehow more vulnerable. "I thought we were meeting tomorrow," I said, gesturing to the chair opposite mine. "Some decisions don't improve with delay." He sat, his posture stiff, hands clasped between his knees. "Before I give you my answer, I need to understand why. Why maintain the farm when you could have lived anywhere? Why hide your success from me? Why let me believe we were struggling financially when you were building an empire?" The questions were fair. They deserved honest answers. "The farm was never a front or a hobby," I began carefully. "It's been the laboratory where Agritech's innovations were born and tested. Every product we've developed started with a real problem I encountered working this land." William frowned. "But why live like?" He gestured around at the modest furnishings. "This, when you could afford luxury. Your mother and I grew up in families that valued simplicity. Ostentation made us uncomfortable." I smiled faintly at memories of Elaine's horror at flashy displays of wealth. "But more importantly, we wanted authenticity in our research. How could we develop solutions for ordinary farmers if we lived removed from their daily reality? And keeping it from me? What was authentic about that?" Here was the heart of his hurt, the core of the betrayal he felt. I chose my words with care, knowing they might determine our future relationship. "That was my decision, more than your mother's," I acknowledged. "Elaine wanted to tell you when you turned 18. I insisted we wait, wanting you to develop your own path without the burden or temptation of inherited wealth." "Burden?" William's laugh held no humor. "Do you have any idea what it was like growing up thinking we were just scraping by? Watching other kids get cars for their 16th birthdays while I worked minimum wage jobs for gas money, believing my college education was draining my parents' retirement savings? I never intended for you to feel deprived," I said softly. "We provided everything you needed and most of what you wanted. The limitations were meant to teach value, not create hardship. They taught me that farming was a dead-end struggle," William countered. "That education and escape were my only paths to security. That I needed to save my parents from their own stubborn attachment to an outdated way of life." The irony struck us both simultaneously. William's decision to save me by selling the farm had been based on a complete misunderstanding of our financial reality, a misunderstanding I had carefully constructed and maintained. "I owe you an apology," I said, the words difficult but necessary. "Not for building Agritech or preserving our family heritage, but for failing to trust you with the truth when you were ready for it. Your mother was right. We should have told you years ago." William's rigid posture softened slightly, and I shouldn't have tried to sell the farm. Regardless of our financial situation, it was wrong. I was wrong. The admission seemed physically painful for him. But you have to understand, Dad. I thought I was helping. I genuinely believed you were too proud or too sentimental to make a necessary decision. Pride and sentiment weren't my motivations, I explained. This land is not just dirt and crops. It's living research. The irrigation systems, soil sensors, and automated equipment here are all prototypes more advanced than anything we've commercially released. Selling to Eastern Development would have given our biggest competitor access to technology we've spent decades developing. Understanding dawned in William's eyes. So when I thought I was saving you from sentimentality, you were nearly costing the company its competitive advantage, I finished, though the personal betrayal hurt far more than any potential business setback. We sat in silence for several moments, the ticking of the grandfather clock marking the passage of time, as we each processed decades of misunderstanding. Finally, William spoke. I accept your terms, all of them, but I have a condition of my own. I raised an eyebrow, waiting, complete honesty from now on. No more secrets, no more separate worlds. If I'm going to learn this business from the ground up, I want to know everything: the company's true financial position, your actual medical prognosis, the succession plan details, everything. The request was reasonable, necessary even for rebuilding trust. I nodded slowly. Agreed. Starting with this. The doctors are optimistic about my treatment, but recovery will be measured in years, not months. The 2-year transition timeline may need to be extended. Then we'll extend it, William said simply. The company has waited this long for a formal successor. It can wait until you're ready. Something eased in my chest that had nothing to do with cancer and everything to do with the first genuine connection I'd felt with my son in years. In the months that followed, William's education began in earnest. He started, as I had insisted, in the fields, learning the fundamentals of soil science, crop rotation, and sustainable agriculture practices. He lived in the old farmhand cottage, rising before dawn like any farmer, experiencing the physical demands I had known all my life. Initially awkward, with calluses forming on his once smooth hands, he gradually found satisfaction in tangible accomplishments: straight furrows, healthy seedlings, problems solved through innovation rather than delegation. From the fields, he progressed to our research facilities, studying the technology that had transformed agriculture across the country. My recovery progressed in parallel with his education. The aggressive treatment protocol gradually gave way to monitoring and maintenance. Hair that had fallen out during chemotherapy began to return, silver rather than the brown of my youth. Strength returned incrementally, allowing me to join William occasionally in the fields, now as teacher rather than sole practitioner. By the following spring, doctors confirmed what we had cautiously hoped. The cancer was in remission, not cured. Stage 3 lung cancer is never truly vanquished but controlled. Life expectancy measured in years rather than months. That same week, William completed the first phase of his agricultural education, presenting a comprehensive analysis of potential improvements to our prototype irrigation system. The executive team, initially skeptical of nepotism, found themselves impressed by his unique combination of financial acumen and newly acquired agricultural knowledge. One evening, after reviewing quarterly projections together, William asked the question that had clearly been on his mind. Why did you never take the company public? With its valuation, an IPO would have made you a billionaire many times over. We sat on the farmhouse porch, watching the sun set over fields newly planted with this year's crop. Spring peepers created a symphony in the growing twilight. Money was never the point, I explained. Solving real problems for people who work the land was our mission. Public companies become slaves to shareholder value and quarterly returns. We wanted the freedom to think in terms of generational improvements, not 3-month profit cycles. William nodded thoughtfully. I'm beginning to understand that perspective. 6 months ago, I would have pushed for maximum valuation and exit strategy. Now I see the value in building something sustainable. His words warmed me more than the evening sunshine. Not complete transformation. William would always have more of his mother's technological vision than my agrarian sensibility, but growth and understanding I had feared might never come. Your mother would be proud of you, I said quietly. not just for learning the business, but for being willing to question your own assumptions. William's smile held a hint of sadness. I wish she could have seen this, that we could have had these conversations as a family. So do I, son. Every day. The lessons of our family's journey have been hard-won and deeply felt. I learned that secrets kept with good intentions can still create painful divisions. William learned that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or corporate titles, but in purpose and connection. Together, we discovered that legacy isn't something bestowed but continually created through choices and relationships. The Richardson farm continues to serve as Agritech's living laboratory, now with father and son working side by side to honor the past while innovating for the future. The company remains private, focused on mission rather than maximum profit, though William has introduced efficiencies that have increased our impact and reach. My cancer remains in remission, a shadow that occasionally darkens routine checkups, but no longer defines daily existence. Each day is a gift I don't take for granted. Each sunset shared with my son, a blessing I once feared would never come. If there's wisdom to be gleaned from our story, perhaps it's this: the value of anything, land, business, relationships, lies not in its market price but in what it cultivates over time. The richest harvest comes not from what we accumulate but from what we nurture and eventually pass on. What about you? Have you ever discovered that something you thought you understood completely had hidden depths and value you'd never recognized? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if our story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others find these reflections on family, forgiveness, and the true meaning of legacy. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, the most valuable inheritance is rarely what shows up in a will.